changed into a brand new comfortable dress, running, jumping, and playfully chasing her pet dog on the lush green grass. The utter panic of yesterday had been wiped away without a trace, replaced by absolute freedom and peace. Carole right on her own throne. The protectors, through instinct and determination, had won a glorious victory. The steel boundary had been clearly defined. There was no forgiveness by radiant, fragrant flowers. The dirt-stained shoes had been scrubbed clean and neatly put away in the corner of the closet, waiting for the day to step out into the big wide world with the little girl. The cruel person, full of base malice, had been stripped of her weapons and banished to eternal silence. Middleton stood on the wooden porch, holding a warm cup of tea, her gentle, steady eyes following every stride of her granddaughter. Inside the house, the silk scarf containing the crushed rose petals had been thrown straight into the trash, replaced. Stories about Camilla still kept the crown on her head, was still allowed to stay in the most luxurious rooms of the castle, but she had permanently become a ghost. All actual power, all dominance over the Wales family and the future generation had been blatantly stripped away. She was locked in her own ultimate isolation, facing cold walls that no one would ever want to step past, to visit, or show respect to. At the same time, in a completely different light-filled space, in the sun-drenched garden of the Bucklebury estate, Charlotte was laughing heartily. The 11-year-old girl had changed, strode out of the room, leaving the sound of his heels striking the stone floor, and the slamming door echoing dryly in the large, empty room. The most cruel punishment had been executed. No police stormed in. There was no dragging or kicking out of the palace for the paparazzi to weave queen. She waited for Charles to fly into a rage, deliver the harshest punishments, and immediately throw these insubordinate people out of the castle. But Charles didn't budge. The king stood there, his shoulders slightly slumped. His eyes looking at Camilla now held no shred of respect or deference, only the cold, icy glare of a mother ready to tear apart anyone who touched her child. The defensive wall of the Wales family had been erected, fortified, united, and impenetrable. Backed into a corner, Camilla spun around to look at King Charles. Her eyes were filled with urgency, demands, and commands. She waited for her kingdom's most powerful husband to speak up and defend the supreme honor of the were extremely gloomy, not daring to look straight at the wife waiting for him. He stared at the crushed, mud-stained bouquet in Carole's hand, then shifted his pained gaze to the pale, tear-streaked face of his granddaughter, huddled crushed petals, accusing the recent act not as a noble correction of etiquette, nor a lesson in royal manners. It was a crime of psychological manipulation, a base, wicked act of emotion. Little girl who brought flowers from the garden to give to her grandfather with all purity and innocence. The girl was absolutely not a punching bag, a tool for anyone, even the person wearing the crown on her head, to use as a place to vent their cruel tyranny and sinister prejudices. Not stopping at a reminder, Carole stripped bare Camilla's despicable tactics right in front of everyone standing at the highest echelons of the court. She pointed a finger straight at the courtesies. Carole launched a direct attack. She stated bluntly, in an undeniable tone, emphasizing every single word, Charlotte was only an 11-year-old child. Without the direct presence of myself or the princess, are to be stopped immediately. No exceptions. No prior reporting needed. Execute immediately. The other end of the line gave only a terse confirmation of absolute obedience. The call ended in less than 20 seconds. William put away his phone. William's fingers glided quickly across the screen, connecting directly to the head of the Wales family's private security team. The prince's voice rang out in the confined space of the car. Not loud, not shouting, but cold and sharp as a sword just drawn from its sheath. Listen carefully. From this moment, allude to Charlotte's small silhouette, then emphasized every word. Any member of the Queen's retinue and Queen Camilla herself, if they appear within a 20-meter radius around the children, went on, I am issuing an absolute no-approach order. The entire private living area, classrooms, and personal space of the three Wales children is a no-go zone. He paused for a beat, his eyes trashy evidence right in the ruler's face in front of the king. That was an unforgivable insult to royal authority. Camilla was just waiting. She leisurely took a sip of entire Middleton family had been permanently banished from all royal privileges, that the Wales children would from now on be subjected to strict education from her own hands to bend them back into proper shape. Camilla, even though she had been publicly humiliated in front of her husband yesterday, in Camilla's sinister mind, she firmly believed that Carole Middleton's insolence was a bloody suicidal blow. A commoner woman daring to loudly insult the Queen, daring to point her eyes on the solid gold-plated phone sitting on the desk. She waited for it to ring. She waited for King Charles to walk in, bringing the punishing news that the Oak Room of Windsor Castle is never a place for fragile souls. Today's luncheon, held under the guise of celebrating 11-year-old Princess Charlotte's academic achievements, was in fact— But at the other end of the table, Queen Camilla sat like an ice statue. She could not accept that the court's attention was being eclipsed by a commoner girl holding a royal title. Without resorting to vulgar scolding, Camilla unleashed razor-sharp psychological attacks, perfectly camouflaged in signal. When royal authority clashes with the instinct to protect one's flesh and blood, will the absolute isolation, counterattack from the Middleton family permanently strip the Queen of her claws, and what heavy price will Camilla have to pay for the tears of the future heir? Act, a hidden battlefield. King Charles sat at the center, smiling proudly. Prince William and Princess Kate sat close to their daughter, their vigilant demeanor forming an invisible shield of protection, but completely crushed the Queen's fake arrogance. She didn't need to use a guard of honor to show off her power, didn't need arrest warrants to convict. She used the naked, mud-stained truth. Air around the two women was drained, suffocatingly tense. On one side was the Queen, holding supreme power backed by the throne, accustomed to using intimidation and scheming to suppress others. On the other side was the primal, fierce instinct of a grandmother, ready to burn everything down in her hand, to strip her enemy of all weapons. The silence enveloping the Oak Room was now thick, so heavy that one could clearly hear the gasps of those present. Camilla, sensing the genuine threat, trampling all rules to protect her child. Carole clenched the crushed bouquet in her hand. Her eyes, blazing with resentment and determination, stared straight, drilling deep into Camilla's starting to waver pupils. The sheer contempt in Carole's gaze. Children needed their safety protected, and I stood there and failed to do that. Charles didn't need to name his wife directly. His admission of his mistake was the most cruel death sentence for the Queen's power in this war. King Charles had cast aside his came from the other end of the line. It was not the authoritative, distant tone of a king delivering a sentence. It was a low voice, hoarse with exhaustion and full of compromise, from a man who had just realized the level of cruelty of the very woman he shared a bed with. King Charles. There were no flowery words of cover-up, no long fake diplomatic greetings. Charles got straight to the core of the matter. He didn't issue any punishment for Carole's insubordination yesterday. On the contrary, the most powerful man in England was personally lowering his shield over the phone line. "I owe you an apology," Charles said slowly, each word uttered carrying the heavy weight of remorse. "On behalf of the terrible things that happened in the Oak Room, on behalf of Charlotte's panicked tears, you were right to act that way." Her face hardened, every muscle tense, her eyes revealing extreme disgust and contempt. Camilla used a low, raspy, irritable, and spiteful tone of voice without any regard for the people around them, piercing, completely unmasked attack. She stepped forward, completely blocking the little girl's path. Raising her arm, she pointed a sharp, diamond-studded finger straight at Charlotte's muddy shoe against the surface of her pristine white silk dress, leaving faint but clearly visible stains. The moment Charlotte stepped over the balcony threshold, before the radiant, expectant smile on her lips could fade, her eager eyes, searching for her grandfather, suddenly froze. Camilla was already standing there. She stood right in the middle of the pathway, like a predator with its net cast, just waiting for the prey to walk into the trap. She did not miss this golden opportunity. There was no grandmotherly gentleness, not a single inquiry about where the child had just been. Camilla delivered a direct, vicious, and complete crushed, tattered, mud-stained bouquet of roses high. She thrust the glaring evidence straight toward Camilla's face. She didn't use vague insinuations, didn't use hollow diplomatic phrases, or evade to a still lake. The words came out like an absolute command, instantly extinguishing the Queen's attempt to raise her voice. Without letting her enemy react, Carole raised that and murderous intent surrounding Carole's gaze, hurriedly adjusted her posture to regain her superior authority. She lifted her arrogant chin high, took a deep breath, and prepared to open her mouth to issue an immediate order of expulsion or a sharp reprimand about hierarchy to crush this commoner woman. But Carole Middleton didn't give her the chance to utter another venomous word. "Enough!" Carole's voice rang out. It wasn't a shrill, hysterical scream, but a deep, steely tone, carrying the weight of 1,000 pounds, thrown straight in. Roof SUV slammed shut completely, cutting off the suffocating and artificial air of Windsor Castle. The car glided away under the ancient trees, leaving behind an uncleaned battlefield. Inside the armored cabin, a dead silence fell so heavy, completely collapsed. The flowery diplomatic covers, the fake curtains hiding family conflicts, had been mercilessly torn away, leaving a ruined, humiliating battlefield. And on that battlefield, the most powerful crowned woman had just taken a fatal ambush, losing all face without any ability to fight back. The door of the black bullet pulled behind her mother. Charles's silence at this moment was no longer weakness to keep the peace. It was shock, a belated and bitter realization of the level of cruelty of the very woman he had chosen. No words of defense were offered. No command to protect the Queen was issued. The official banquet had been connected. But the other end of the line was not a ruthless banishment order, as she was fantasizing. Carole Middleton stood in a living room flooded with natural light. On the oak table was a crystal vase filled with freshly cut roses from the home garden, radiant, and Camilla's gaze swept over the phone. It was past noon, but it remained completely silent, stone cold. She had no idea that dozens of miles away at the private and quiet Middleton residence in Bucklebury, a call had indeed lawless. Charlotte's muddy shoes from yesterday had been tucked deep inside a closed closet. The private phone in her hand was ringing the screen, displaying a top-level security code reserved exclusively for the king heading the royal family. Carole took a deep breath and answered the call. Her demeanor was calm, unflinching, without a trace of fear of someone about to be punished. "Carole!" The voice for there. Camilla's venomous words choked in her throat. Charles stepped into the middle of the room, the door behind him slowly slamming shut, locking the two in a closed, suffocating space. The king did not smile. He didn't open his arms to approach and kiss or comfort her as usual. Charles stood rooted to the spot, exactly 3 steps away from her. His eyes, which normally always held unconditional tolerance, blindness, and indulgence for Camilla, he saw King Charles enter. Finally, the moment she had been waiting for had arrived. Camilla stood up abruptly, smoothing the creases of her silk dress, lifting her chin ready to receive the news of her enemy's humiliating downfall. "Charles, you've finally arrived." Camilla spoke up deliberately, drawing out the syllables full of satisfaction and condescension. "Have you finished dealing with those insolent people? That undisciplined 11-year-old child and her grandmother must pay the price." Holding a hot cup of Earl Grey tea. The corner of her mouth still held a half smile, a mix of supreme arrogance and vicious triumph. She was certain she had won. The next day in the private office, deep in the east wing of Windsor Castle, the air was so quiet one could clearly hear the crackle of charcoal in the fireplace. Queen Camilla sat leisurely in a crimson velvet upholstered chair, legs crossed. Camilla might wear a crown studded with 1,000 diamonds, might rule the most magnificent rooms of Windsor Castle, but she had lost all power over the future generation. The trap of isolation was officially sprung shut without a single loophole. He looked up at Kate. Their eyes met in the darkness, transmitting a silent but ruthlessly resolute message. The steel wall had been erected. The enemy was permanently locked outside. The royal family. Camilla felt a profound terror, a chilling dread running down her spine and seeping into her marrow. She realized that her greatest protective shield, the supreme power of her life, had been brutally revoked. "Charles!" Camilla's voice trembled, breaking. The arrogant, bossy demeanor from earlier had completely evaporated, leaving a terrified, aging woman. But the king still didn't answer. The family. Charles turned on his heel. Shifting his weight, he turned his back on the queen. Without bothering to cast a lingering glance, without a drop of pity, the king— He couldn't be bothered to open his mouth to the one who had heartlessly destroyed his granddaughter. He only looked at her with the eyes of someone looking at a completely invisible person, someone who had personally taken a knife and severed all blood ties with the rest of— was like a bucket of cold water thrown straight at the adults present. King Charles stood stunned in the middle of the room, the teacup in his hand, shaking violently. His face clearly showed shock, but it churning with sparks of fury as he saw his daughter cowering in fear before her step-grandmother. Kate rushed forward, her chair pushed back and sliding across the carpet. The princess's face was pale, with heart's feet were rooted to the floor by the weakness deeply ingrained in his subconscious. Prince William immediately abandoned his unfinished conversation with an aide. He snapped around the smile on his lips, vanishing completely, replaced by a rigid tension in his jaw. His eyes darkened, break, and indignation, her hands clenched into fists. But before William or Kate could cross the long table to protect their daughter, someone had acted faster and more decisively than everyone else. Carole Middleton. She didn't run in utter panic and confusion. The gift of love, containing the purity of a child, had in an instant turned into evidence of a filthy, cowardly crime of emotional abuse. Camilla stood up, still dripping with morning dew, slipped from her small arms. They fell scattered onto the cold, indifferent marble floor. The crushed petals were flattened beneath Camilla's designer shoes as she stepped forward to increase the pressure. Charlotte took 2 steps back, her back hitting the glass doorframe. She burst into tears streaming down her face. Air. But that vicious triumph did not last long. Charlotte's panicked sobbing cries tore through the quiet, artificial atmosphere of the oak room. The sound straight, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked down from above at the child crying breathlessly, the corners of her mouth curling into a cold, cruel, and deeply satisfied smile. Finally, she had defeated the pride of the House of Wales, trampling the confidence of the future dogmas to crush a child who was tightly holding a bouquet of flowers meant for her. She wanted Charlotte to engrave in her mind that regardless of her title within the spat out with the precision and malice of someone specialized in destroying the spirits of others. Camilla dragged out the strictest royal standards and rigid straight through the child's newly recovered confidence. She didn't scold the little girl for getting her clothes dirty. She directly attacked Charlotte's self-esteem and very existence. Camilla called the mudstains an unforgivable defilement. She disparaged the stained dress as proof of inferiority in the blood, a humiliating disgrace that shamed the entire family line. Every word, every syllable was share and subscribe for more. Also click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it. No handshakes of reconciliation or compromise. The justice of family love had struck down with the quietest punishment, crushing all the hypocrisy and cruelty of royal power. Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to skipped across the damp grass left by last night's rain. Charlotte carefully navigated through the dew-soaked bushes, picking the reddest, freshest roses. She wanted to personally bring this little gift up to her grandfather, and everyone innocently hoping the flower's beauty could dispel the earlier coldness and tension. Charlotte clutched the bouquet tightly to her chest, careful to keep the thorns from scratching her hands, and then awkwardly hurried up the slippery marble steps back to the oak room balcony. But the hasty, carefree nature of a child had left undeniable physical traces. Her shiny leather shoes had picked up some mud from the wet garden, and a few streaks of murky water from the still dewy flower stems had accidentally brushed against. Felt like she could breathe. Freed from restrictive rules and sharp taunts, Charlotte quickly regained her innate cheerfulness. Under the shade of ancient trees, the little girl dropped her weapon. On her lap, a gray silk scarf was carefully folded tightly, wrapping the crushed, tattered, and mud-covered rose petals inside. That bouquet was no longer a rejected gift. It was physical evidence, a bloody spoil of war from the direct confrontation between her arms tightening as if wanting to use her own flesh and blood to shield her from all outside attacks. The princess's eyes never left the dried mud stains on the hem of the white silk dress, the physical imprint of the vicious humiliation the queen had just inflicted. Every stain was a knife slashing into a mother's pride. On the opposite seat, Carole Middleton sat with a straight back in the posture of a general who had just withdrawn from the front lines but had yet to breathe. It was hard to breathe. There were no more sobs, only Charlotte's choked, broken gasps. The 11-year-old princess curled up on the leather seat, burying her small face in her mother's chest. Kate hugged her daughter tight. Slowly stood up straight. She didn't retreat even half a step. On the contrary, she stepped forward, deliberately closing the distance with Camilla directly encroaching on the queen's safe zone. The child, the mud-covered bouquet in Carole's hand, was no longer a discarded, reviled gift. It had turned into a sharp weapon. It was the most concrete naked piece of evidence exposing all the base psychological manipulation and petty malice that Camilla had just unleashed. Carole's crushed petal covered in mud clinging to her fingers was another piece of undeniable physical evidence Carole collected of Camilla's cruelty. The mud from the child's shoes from the fallen stems transferred to Carole's hands. She did not shy away from the dirt. She gathered the ruined bouquet in the palm of her hand, gripping the thorny stems tightly. Immediately after Carole turned and hugged her sobbing granddaughter, she patted rhythmically on Charlotte's trembling back, giving the little girl a solid anchor. At the same time, Carole used her own body to pivot, creating an absolute physical shield, completely blocking Camilla's disgusted, contemptuous view of the suffocating all her inflating illusions of power. The smile on Camilla's lips froze, distorted, and then gradually shattered into pieces. She took a step back, her hands gripping the armrest of the chair, her eyes beginning to panic, frantically searching every facial feature of her husband. For the first time since stepping into this exterior, not a single word was uttered, not a single angry shout, not a single explanation or argument. Charles's absolute silence fell like a giant boulder, weighing heavily on Camilla's chest, had now completely vanished. At the bottom of his eyes, there was only a dull, gray, cold, empty, and deeply alienated look. He stared at the crowned woman in front of him, his gaze as sharp as a scalpel, stripping away all the base, petty, and malicious schemes she always tried to hide beneath her luxurious, widened in horror. Her lips trembled violently, trying to mouth an explanation, a justification for her gift, but her throat had grown tight and bitter. Extreme fear and choking self-pity overwhelmed the child's entire mind. Her hands, which were tightly holding the roses, suddenly became numb and powerless. The crimson stems still completely collapsed. At the age of 11, the little girl was aware enough to understand what humiliation and contempt were. But her tender soul lacked the strength and cunning to fight back against the vicious blows of the woman bearing the title of queen. Charlotte's eyes was castle. She would forever be an inferior, being an individual unworthy of respect. The psychological attack was so excessively cruel, relentless, and sudden that Charlotte pocket. He didn't call a lawyer, nor did he resort to the intervention of the courts or police. In this ruthless world of royalty, the most terrifying punishment didn't come from steel handcuffs, but from the absolute deprivation of privilege. Eyes flashed with a cold, terrifyingly sharp look. The patience of a future king had run out. The last, thinnest shred of respect for his stepmother had been torn to pieces, along with every petal commoner mother and the woman wearing the most powerful crown of the dynasty. William sat next to Carole. The darkness in the car obscured half of the prince's face, but could not hide the churning of the tense muscles at his jawline. He looked at his trembling daughter, then over at the crushed petals in his mother-in-law's hand. His eye that fell on the marble floor earlier. No discussion took place in the car. There were no nods of compromise, no need for any consensus from royal advisors or